What's up, everyone? Just had a conversation with Josh Cathcart. You guys may know him, hitting done right. Used to be the baseball doctor, and we really had a good conversation. And I appreciate Josh reaching out to me. Not many swing coaches want to hear what I have to say. It goes against a lot of what is taught, but I appreciate his curiosity, and it was really a good conversation. Um, I haven't done a live stream before, so I'm not really sure how it works, but it looks like you guys can send me messages, which is cool. Um, I'm assuming everything's good, and I'm not just like here talking to myself or silent from your perspective. So, what I wanted to touch on was a topic that is brought up quite a bit, and I just wanted to further expand on it because Josh and I touched on it, but I think that it needs a little bit more discussion, and that is that players from long ago, and I even hear like even just 20 years ago, didn't face the level of pitching that they face today. Now, I have a few thoughts about this. For one, speed isn't necessarily something that a hitter doesn't want. Once you get used to speed, it actually can work for the hitter's advantage. Um, the harder the pitcher throws, of course, the harder you can hit the ball. And so that's number one. But I don't want to concede that necessarily pitchers are, we don't have evidence of how fast pitchers were throwing. I think we assume that guys were not throwing as fast. Um, and that may be true. That may be true. That may be, if it is a difference, maybe it's three. I've heard 3 miles an hour. Um, I've heard up to 7 miles an hour. And the assumption is that the assumption is that the swing must be different because the pitching is faster. And you can't get away with things that they did again. I mean, I even hear like 20 years ago or 100 years ago. You just can't get away with the same stuff. I think that it's just sort of an impetuous response. It's a knee-jerk reaction um, to the topic, to say that, oh, hitters just couldn't do as well back then. Um, and there's something called a mere exposure bias, human bias, which says that what we're most exposed to is what we tend to favor, what we know we tend to favor. And I think that that's what's going on here. People are just kind of assuming that today is the best of everything, and anything I don't know of, is not as good. So um, the notion that hitters from yesterday, couldn't hit today's pitching. I think all that would happen is they just have to get used to the faster speed, if there is a faster speed. Um, and and just get ready earlier. I mean, it doesn't mean that the whole structure of the swing would change. And I think that again, it comes to people thinking that they see a long arm, the barred out arm, and they see that it's long, and so they say to themselves, well, then it's a long arm, so it's going to take longer to get to the ball. That's sort of a semantics issue. Um, a longer front arm doesn't mean it's going to take you longer to get to the ball. It's just, I just often hear that. And I think the discussion I just had with Josh, I believe that that's what he was kind of insinuating. And so what they do is they tend to get the arms closer to the body and then just kind of extend out, thinking that it's just going to be quicker to have the ball, to have your hands more in front of your body and just kind of extend out towards the ball. There's really no reason that I can think of that a longer front arm would mean you're taking longer to get to the ball. You're using more of your rotation to get to the ball. But why would that be any slower? So we're going, you know, to get to the contact, we're rotating into it as opposed to maybe doing that. Why would one be quicker than the other? Um, if you want to, if you want to, I mean, mechanics isn't really the place to look if you're trying to increase launch quickness. And I think that we're overly obsessed with launch quickness and making contact in today's swing instruction. There are other things to swing mechanics than just launch quickness and ensuring contact. Not that I'm conceding that a front arm dominant swing doesn't do those things optimally, but we're just overly kind of concerned with that. But if you want to ensure contact or get to launch or have a faster launch quickness, then a connected position at contact is going to be extremely beneficial. It's one of the best ways to optimize those things, because you're turning to contact and maintaining a lot of connection. So the ball is basically, it's traveling farther to get to you. So the last thing I really want to say, so basically, if it's traveling farther to get to you, you have more time to see it. So, I mean, a great way to make yourself to ensure contact more and to have a faster launch quickness is to have a more connected position at contact. If you're talking mechanics, how do you adjust your mechanics to be faster to the ball and ensure contact more? A more connected position at contact, I think, is the best way. But again, I just think we're overly concerned kind of with those two things. There's more to great mechanics than that. Those are important, but I think something like launch quickness can be improved probably by getting stronger in the core. And I have a lot of thoughts about how we're training athletes that I think it's pretty detrimental as well. I think there are much better ways to train athletes. I think we really need to just build strength without damaging the joints. I think that's the main thing. That's a challenge. If you're just trying to build strength and you don't care about your joints, you can basically be sloppy and go about it. I mean, it's easy, just do a bunch of Olympic lifts, do them a lot, and you'll get huge, and in 2 years your joints will start to break down, or in 10 years. It's not a good recipe for a long career. So um, look at slow movement training to build muscle. Look at things like rings, gymnastics rings. Look at yoga. I'm all in favor of building muscle. We saw from the steroid era how much that can do. um, it's an immense amount. I mean, I wish we could quantify how much each pound of body weight translates into home runs, more home runs. That'd be an interesting number. We could probably just look at bonds to do that. Um, but obviously body weight is important. So you want to build as much muscle as possible. That's clear. But the challenge is doing it without damaging the joints. Last thing I want to say about launch quickness and the notion that a more barred out front arm is going to make you slower to the ball is, if that were the case, there are just a few players that kind of smashed that whole theory. Ken Griffey Jr. is one. He had no problems. He would face extremely fast pitching. And I'm trying to think who he was facing recently that I saw. I mean, it's just nasty lefty pitching coming from like side angle, just everything that's just scary about facing pitching. And he had no problem with it. And he's got an extremely barred out front arm. So he, right there, being the 11th best pound for pound hitter of all time, and not having played 100 years ago. I mean, he just played recently. I don't think people would argue that the pitching has gotten so much faster between Griffey's years and now. I don't think they'd try to argue that. But even if they did, we got Paul Goldschmidt, very straight in the front arm, a lot of front humerus compression, very front arm dominant in his structure. Probably the best hitter overall in the past 10 or so years. I mean, consistently great. So he smashes that whole theory. I mean, if you couldn't possibly hit fast pitching with a barred out front arm, how would Goldschmidt do what he's been doing? He's not only, so I mean, I don't know if my point is to derail that whole argument or make the argument that a barred out front arm is actually better. I do tend to like to see it more. Now, not everyone has that flexibility to be real barred out in the front arm, but and that's fine. You don't really need it. You don't need it, but I do prefer to see it. I think that it is a slight advantage to have that flexibility to where I wouldn't want hitters forcing it. So if you don't have it, I don't think it's that big a deal. We have someone like, what's really a big deal is a baseline connected position at contact. That's what's a big deal. And achieving that through a front arm dominant structure. But Paul Goldschmidt blows it out of the water. What about Chris Davis? Chris Davis, who I don't know what happened to him. He vanished, but he's one of the best pound for pound hitters of all time. He played just a few years ago. So the whole notion that you can't possibly hit today's pitching, it's different. The game is, I hear it all the time on Instagram. The game has changed. You don't understand. A barred out front arm would never work. And it's just not the case. It's not what evidence shows. I've noticed I'm always being told that I'm infatuated with the swing of long ago, and the game has changed. That's what I hear, and it would never work today. And it just doesn't make any sense. And again, I'm not saying a barred out front arm is 100% necessary. Um, it's just pick up a bat with just your front arm and swing it with just your front arm. Most people tend to want to be more barred out in the front arm. If you look at a guy who only has his front arm, Tommy Morrissey, he gets very barred out in his front arm. I think that over time, if you only had your front arm, then you would tend to be more barred out because it would just give you more leverage. And that's why I tell people with the front arm progression, spend some time on that first step. And I also have been more and more telling people, grab a heavier bat than your, a wooden bat, 33, 34 inches long. That in the beginning is going to pull you into more front arm dominant positions. It's going to kind of force you faster into those positions, and then use the training bat. Once you understand the right structure, then use the training bat, because it's kind of like the heavy bat's like training wheels, and the training bat's like more realistic in what you're going to feel. But again, it's still going to be strengthening the muscles and delivering that new structure to the swing. So for those of you who have just joined, I'm kind of rehashing some of the topics that I talked about with a gentleman by the name of Josh Cathcart, who asked me to an interview on his channel. So he'll be posting that shortly, and maybe I'll even post some of that. But I really respect that Josh reached out to me. He's got a ton of followers on Instagram and YouTube, and he's hitting done right on his channels. And I respect that he reached out to me. I mean, again, most of the time, people out there in instruction, they don't want to hear what I have to say because it goes against a lot of what is taught. But I'm just relaying what I've found, and it happens to go 100% against a lot of what is taught. It flies in the face of a lot of it. So, anyways, those guys really prove that a long front arm is not unable to catch up to fast pitching. And those are both righties, Goldschmidt and Chris Davis. And there are probably others. I don't watch a whole lot of Major League Baseball from today, but there are probably others who have a very straight front arm. Maybe you guys can help me out with. But again, I'm not saying the straight front arm is a quintessential part. It's just what people tend to want to do when swinging with the front arm only. And if that's what you tend to want to do, swinging with the front arm only, that's what you should do in your regular swing. Let me take some questions. I've noticed I have more time using front arm dominant swing. It got to the point where I hook a lot of balls foul. I have more time. So there you go. There's someone who has more time. A lot of times, again, it's just, I really, guys, think that it's a matter of people see a long arm and the word long just kind of, oh, long, it's going to take a long time. No, I don't want to take a long time to get the ball. So they coach it out of kids. And it's rather detrimental. And kids will want to do this because kids to me are movement geniuses. And unfortunately, we see these movements that they're doing and we want to change it. Maybe because they see the kids kind of getting out, sort of waving at pitches out in front. And they see this barred out front arm and they equate that waving with pitches out front with the problem being a barred out front arm. But as I was telling Josh, kids don't have the development of their pitch recognition skills just yet. And they don't have the development of their hand-eye coordination just yet. So they're going to swing and miss, and they're going to be out in front. Uh, you just have to be patient, because it's certainly not their mechanics that are the problem. It's usually not. And even if it is, I wouldn't instruct kids. It just makes the game, real young kids, they rarely enjoy drilling. And I know this is like going to be blasphemy out there, to say don't drill young kids. But look, for most of baseball, and yes, long ago, when I believe kids were developing better swings overall, the days of the sandlots, they just played because they loved it. And nowadays, you don't see that. Uh, and but on top of that, just the swing that you're trying to get them to do most of the time is just not. It's not. It's not any better, and it's more than likely, from all the evidence that I've gathered and experience and coaching, all the years I've coached, all the video I've looked at, it appears that the swing that is being taught today is not quite as good as what kids would typically develop on their own, quite naturally, which is more front arm dominance. And the reason why they do that is because they're just not strong enough to manhandle a bat. And so what they do is, at the start of the swing, they tend to kind of connect and sort of ride the rotation of the torso. So, and again, people see that and they just think, oh, that's the problem. That's why he's missing it. Don't worry if he's missing it. Let him go. He'll get his PR, and hand-eye coordination will get up to par at some point. They just need to see more pitches, and it'll come. My 16-year-old son this year has been missing more. His swing seems more coiled and longer. Yeah. It's more coiled and longer. I'm assuming longer means in the front arm, but I'm not sure. I mean, and this year, so he's been missing more, and his swing seems coiled. Not sure what coiled means, and longer. I mean, it's hard to assess what's going on just from a couple sentences, but I'd have to. His swing seems more coiled and longer. Just look at video. I don't know. You're just kind of looking at it with the naked eye. Maybe it's just seeming that way. I don't know. But again, the whole the viewing of data, or whether that data be video or just the naked eye, whether it comes from video or the naked eye, and then connecting that with a certain flaw, needs to be done very meticulously. I think a lot of times we just impetuously say, he's missing more, must be this. And that's kind of what I was just talking about. The problem probably isn't a longer front arm. Again, if it was, how would these guys like Griffey and Goldschmidt and Chris Davis and Albert Bell, Mel Ott. I mean, I know people don't like me to go back in the past that far, but it's still extremely difficult pitching under extremely difficult circumstances. More difficult back then. They weren't padded up from head to toe. They used heavier bats. Stadiums were bigger, and they didn't wear helmets. There are many reasons why hitting was harder back then too. Did you have thoughts on the swing of Luis Arraez? Seems unconventional but effective. Sorry, I haven't seen his swing and I don't know who that guy is. I know. Maybe I think I was looking at the leaders actually in the major leagues, and I think I saw his name. Let me see. Yeah. So he's leading in hits. Looks like he's leading in hits, on base percentage, batting average. He's 391. All right. So it sounds like this guy, I don't know, but he could be. Um, I should say that what I seek with mechanics is primarily an increase in power. And the reason why is because you can actually do well with consistency with either front arm dominant or back arm dominant. If you look at someone like Derek Jeter, had very good consistency. But so what I'm looking for is a swing that opens the door up to both. And to me, that's only front arm dominant. Um, Look at a guy like Hank Aaron. You know, he had a lot of consistency and power. I mean, his batting average equaled that of Pete Rose. People don't really understand that, but then he had hundreds and hundreds of more home runs. So I want with swing mechanics, I want the potential for high power um, first, because you can always then turn up the dial on consistency. But what you can't have with a more back arm dominant move is you can't have high power, and so it limits you. So maybe I want to check out this guy's swing. I mean, he's got a high average. I don't know how his power is. Let me see. Um, Sorry, he led the league in batting average last year. Should probably know that. Unbelievable, he led it with a 316 batting average. That's got to be. I know. Terry Pendleton led the league with a 319 batting average. I wonder if this is. No, I think Yastrzemski possibly led it with like a 3.0 something average. But this is one of the lowest league leading batting averages for sure. 316. But now he's at 391. And last year he had 8 homers and 547 at bats. I'm gonna. I'm in. You could either be front arm dominant or back arm dominant with this swing, but I'm gonna guess he's very back arm dominant and maybe pretty disconnected at contact. But I'm interested to see his swing. There have been guys, Wade Boggs comes to mind, who's very front arm dominant in his swing structure, but just didn't like really. He had certain traits that just made him more. That didn't allow him to drive the ball out of the park. One is that he sort of stopped his body rotation pretty early. And then, so obviously, when you do that, your hands continue on and you're a little more disconnected at contact. But he had quite a bit of front humerus compression at the start of the swing, left the hands behind quite a bit, and was really otherwise very front arm dominant. He just stopped his rotation forward, and just kind of was interested in, slapping the ball. So you see front arm dominant and and or back arm dominant in high average hitters. That's again what I'm saying is with a front arm dominant swing, you can have high average. You can go for that still. Or you can go for very good average and extremely high power, which makes up the greatest hitters of all time. The greatest hitters have, Williams and Ruth and whoever else, who Hank Aaron, these guys made up the greatest hitters. But then if you switch to a back arm dominant movement, you really can only have high average. Tony Gwynn, Joe Mauer, Derek Jeter. So let me see. Patrick, what's up, man? I'm gonna do that. I don't know why I'm drawing a blank on his name. Rogers Hornsby analysis. I got it all set up. I'm gonna do it. Um, yeah, it might be a hand-eye coordination issue. With little kids, it's just let them go, man. Just let them go. Put a heavy bat in their hands. And if you're a dad, you want to do something for your kid, really, put a heavy bat in your hands and just be their pitcher and just try to show them every single release and pitch that they see it's cumulative. So if he sees 1,000 more this year and then 1,000 more next year than his peers, he's seeing these releases. And it's a huge advantage. These guys who are just getting pitches from pitching machines or just seeing soft toss, they're going to have much inferior pitch recognition skills than someone who's seeing these releases from a hand. It makes a big difference that you're seeing the ball released from the hand. And then once he, gets old enough, show him some curves. I recommend getting a bucket of soft baseballs. A bucket of soft baseballs with seams. I think that should be one of the most important tools that you have as a hitter. Because then if you run across a pitcher and you guys have an hour and there's a field nearby, you can see, even if it is just 30 pitches, it's cumulative. Have him throw a bunch of curves. Move back towards the backstop, so you don't have to pick up all these balls all over the place. Just move up so the fence is right behind you hitting, if you want, or stay at home plate, whatever. But just view these pitches more and more. Yeah, it's hard to tell what's going on without the video, really. I'm pretty sure it's not a front arm being too long problem. That's not a problem. I mean, it's not a problem is my first thing I want to prove. Second thing I want to prove is actually it's seen more often in the better hitters. Not everyone's going to have that kind of flexibility of a Griffey or a Ted Williams or a Babe Ruth, but it is seen more often in the better hitters. Michael Brantley has a longer front arm. Kyle Tucker has it too. So there you go. 14-year-old stopping torso rotation and hand getting out front. More front arm swings ahead. Power has increased tremendously when he finishes swings. Any specific suggestion to have finished swing? He's probably a righty, if I'm guessing. Righties tend to have this problem where they're not finishing their swing. I think just repetitions, just focusing on trying to finish the swing is, I don't really have any secret for that other than just trying to finish it. Righties, again, have the biggest problem with that. It's funny. Yeah. I have people look behind them as they're going into contact. It's like exactly what the conventional coaches, I think about that every time I teach it. Cause it's always been about keep your head down and everything completely opposite. And I find that oftentimes I tell people, look behind you as you're going through contact. That'll make for a much better position at contact for most people because they're just so used to sort of driving the arms out independently. That's fair, Jamie. Both is the hardest to get. Aaron, Ruth, yeah, both power and consistency is really that's what I'm looking for. When I was growing up, it was all about consistency. This is maybe why I'm so like against that mentality. I bought in 100% to it. I was a kid from the 80s and 90s, and I bought into that whole like if you're hitting for power, it's either it's just a natural ability or it's like irresponsible like slugging, you know? It's like it just wasn't respected in swing instruction. In other words, I knew of myself as someone who liked to work on his swing. I had to work on my swing. I wasn't naturally a good hitter, so I kind of put myself in that category. And once I did, it was like, okay, average. That's the only thing I can go for, you know, be a slap hitter. So I liked all these slap hitters from the 80s. I respected them. Um, there's still something about them I just love. You know, I love that they just could manufacture this sort of, they were like craftsmen, you know, and I just loved that. Um, but it's simply not as valuable. I mean, as much as I didn't care for Griffey back then, I just thought I didn't care for his game. I thought it was like, what's the word? Like brutish, you know, crude. Like I wasn't interested because I thought you couldn't teach it. So why like it? I can never be it. And I think that that's why people like the high average hitters because they assume they can't ever hit for power. So it's like they want to like the people who remind them more of themselves, the everyday average man. But power is teachable. Um, so I use a heavy bat in my training all the time. It definitely helps with becoming more um, front arm dominant because my mechanics have to be even more on point because the bat is so heavy. I think it's a big problem that we have today. Um, we just put such light bats in the hands of kids. If I was a father of a boy who liked baseball, I for sure would only put wood in his hands from the very start. And then what you see is the opposite. You see dads like wanting to get these great bats. I never understood that. Like Ido Portal, a movement guru out there, one of my sort of uh, sort of the guys that I follow, or I used to, and not anymore so much. But he says a quote that really rings true. He said, "The more expensive the equipment, the cheaper the user." And I find that that is just very much true. Just get the basic stuff. Go to a thrift store and get yourself to a point where you're actually um, you revere the beat up stuff, the stuff that's like requires more of you. You know, if there were a smaller sweet spot on a heavy wooden bat, that would be the one you want. I mean, but everyone wants like the lighter, expensive stuff for their young kids. No way. Have a look at Masataka Yoshida, new Red Sox signing. He signed a big contract, shows signs of front arm dominance. I think that what I'm saying, as I told Josh, and this whole live stream is about the conversation I just had with Josh Cathcart, hitting done right guy. Um, what I'm saying about the swing, if true, and I believe it is, will change everything. I mean, like it'll put swing instruction, it'll turn it on its head, and I think it all rings true with people out there. And I think that we're turning the battleship, but we're doing it with a wooden oar, and it's taking a little bit of time. But once we have the first MLB player to uh, employ front arm dominance, and he's not 250, 260, 270, 280 pounds, people will say, oh, wow. And then it'll change on a large scale. And that is coming. Um, it's the truth rises to the top. So I have faith in that. So I'll check out Mastaka. Griffey was my all-time fave since I first saw that swing at the age of 10 in 1990. I was saying to Josh, like, it's so funny uh, that we haven't seen Griffey's swing and said, wait, it's smooth, it's effective. I mean, extreme. I mean, high average, pretty high average. He wasn't off the charts average, but high average, and 56 home runs 2 years in a row. I believe, I don't know if anyone's exceeded 112 over 2 years except for Ruth. There might be one or two, possibly other guys, but I believe last time I checked, only Ruth was in that category of 112 or higher over 2 years. Now, this is being about 90 pounds less than Aaron Judge and hitting only 6 home runs less. So it makes you wonder, what would Aaron Judge do with a Griffey style swing, with a Chris Davis style swing, which is essentially the same thing? A more front arm dominant swing. What would he do with that? Could be 80 homers. So yeah, I'd talk to Josh Cathcart. Good guy. I really, like I said, I respect that he's willing to listen to new ideas. That's just so rare out there. It's a big reason why swing instruction is so slow to change. I mean, really, it's in the ways that matter. It hasn't changed since the 70s, 80s, and 90s in the ways that matter to me. It's so slow to change. I mean, in the 80s and 90s, 2 decades where basically the same swing was taught. There was no one was coming out and saying, wait a second. Then in about 2000, a guy by the name of Mike Epstein came out, and I actually went and saw him talk. And that was in about 2000, 2002. No, I'm sorry. That was in about 2000 and I want to say 6. I went and saw him talk in Nashville. And that's when I said, hold on. I know this is the top guy. He was the rotational hitting guy from about 2000 to the time I saw him. He was, picking up some steam because everything before that had been linear. And I don't, so this guy was popular, and I went and saw him talk, and I thought, hold on, I got to relay what I have. And so it was like months, and I was working with major league guys from that point, and I thought, surely I have something to teach. If this guy's on top, I just spent the whole talk that he had just saying, I can do this. I mean, I can be at the top of this game. And so I started teaching major leaguers, and they started to improve. And then I backed out of the industry. I still felt like I had more to learn. So now I'm back with round 2. Yeah, I talked to Josh Cathcart, and it was good. That's what I want to know. Yoshida seems pretty front arm dominant. That's cool. I'll check him out. For 11-year-old average size boy, how heavy of a bat should he use? Maybe like a wooden bat is usually probably fine. I mean, I wouldn't overthink it really. I mean, what is a wooden bat? Like drop 2 or something like that, or 3 or something. I've worked with Wallenbrock. A lot of what he preaches is being connected in the back arm and letting gravity pick up the swing. Only where he is wrong is the front arm. Oh, connected in the back arm. I've seen a lot of what Wallenbrock teaches, and like it's just very extension out towards the ball from what I remember. It's very box. It's a box, which I don't really care for. I think you should be more free and loose. I don't think you should force a box. And then it's very much extension out towards the ball. This is why guys like Mookie are connected at contact. Yeah. Again, you don't have to be real straight in the front arm and bar it out. But what you better have, if you don't have that, is a real connected position at contact. And that's what Mookie Betts and Mike Trout have. Yeah, I'll do a video on Yoshida. Yeah, I wouldn't look at the MLB Network analysis. Like it's just guys who just it's pretty frustrating for me. I can't watch that stuff. I really try to stay away from really any analysis from others because it's just so off. I've seen enough. I know what they're teaching. I know what they favor. They're going to start to slowly say the stuff that I'm saying. I mean, I've been around this game long enough. I know that they're going to start saying the stuff and they're just going to kind of slide into it and probably not want to credit me, and that's fine. But they'll slide into it and everyone will start saying, bar out your front arm, be more connected at contact. And it'll change. Yeah. So thank you guys. I think that's about it. I've never done a live stream. I think this is probably good. And hope it's been helpful. Thank you guys so much for your support. This movement is moving. And I think a conversation with Josh Cathcart, is a big indication of the battleship slowly turning. And I respect Josh, like I said, for reaching out. Guys, don't forget, please thumbs up the video, subscribe, and you guys are probably all subscribers, but share the video with others, help the movement grow, and I would really appreciate that. And it's going to be fun to see the change in swing instruction. So I'm glad you guys are along for the ride with me. For those of you new to my stuff, check out my website, theswingmechanic.com. I'm working on a new book, and that'll be out shortly, but it sure is hard to rush writing a book. So be on the lookout for that. And thank you guys. I appreciate you guys. And this is fun. We're going to be on the right side of history. And you guys are obviously improving your swings, moving to more front arm dominance. So thank you guys so much. And take care.